Hi, it's Dr. Steve from Misericordia University, and welcome to week 4 of the class Principles of Interface Design. For this week, let's start by looking at designing a menu and good navigation within PowerPoint, and then we're going to look at 3 different practical applications of this information. This week we will be looking at 4 different videos. Again, in this video, let's focus on the menu and navigation in PowerPoint. And in the subsequent videos, let's look at the practical application of creating a virtual museum using PowerPoint. Let's use PowerPoint to design what I call a PowerCast, and then let's look at the design issues involved in creating a Prezi. Before we consider creating sound navigation within PowerPoint and creating a menu, let's start by reviewing a skill, and that is creating action buttons in PowerPoint. Action buttons afford the ability to a user to have interactivity with the PowerPoint application. So what can action buttons do? They can navigate to a particular URL, to a particular slide, either in a current or an outside PowerPoint presentation. They can open up a variety of data files. They can just run a program or an application, and they can also play sound. So how do you create an action button? Well, first of all, go to the Insert menu item in PowerPoint and select Shapes from the Illustrations group. Select Action Buttons. Now these are located at the very bottom of the dialog. Over the years, they have migrated to the bottom of the dialog. So unfortunately, today, in the current versions of PowerPoint, a lot of people miss them because they're way at the bottom. So go right to the bottom of the dialog and then select a button type. Now there are a number of button types with various icons on them that imply specific types of action. But I suggest that you can also use the custom button. In other words, that's a blank button without any icon, and you can type text on there to create a description on it. And then simply click and drag on the slide to create the button, and then Action Settings dialog will open up, and you can specify specific actions to make the button actually work. Let's go out and experiment with a few. So let's start by looking at where to create and how to create these action buttons. Here I'm going to go up to the Insert menu item. I'm going to go to Shapes, and again notice this is under the fold, so to speak, in the design world, way down here. So there are a number of different icons that are available here. For example, buttons with icons on them. I could select this one with the little home on it. I can select any size. When I run this presentation, I will be able to click that button and make it perform different actions. Notice it's suggesting, here's Action Settings is opened, hyperlink to the first slide, which typically is the implication of a home button. So I'll say OK. When I run this, I press this button, and sure enough, it does take me to the first slide. Now, let me navigate back here. We can navigate to a number of different slides. So I'm going to say Insert Shapes, and I can say navigate forward or back. And notice it's saying next slide. Now, even though it says next slide, and that's normally the implication and the standard here of the use of the right arrow icon, I don't just have to do that. I can navigate to any of these slides. I can go to a very particular slide. I can go to other places as well. But I'm going to maintain the consistency. If I ran this show, I could now click on this button. It would take me forward. I could also go backward and do various things. Now, I can also go to a very particular slide. So let me take a look at that. Say you wanted to review with your students. I'm going to go into Insert Shapes. I'm going to navigate down to the bottom, and I'm going to choose the action button blank, the custom button. I'm going to drag one out, and I can make it a little smaller. And I'm going to navigate to a very particular slide. So let me go do that. I'm going to say slide with the ellipsis, the 3 dots. And I'm going to jump to a particular place here. I'm going to go back to, say, this slide where we talked about, well, what do these action buttons do? Or even better, this one, how to create an action button. So it's going to travel there. Notice it locks in the title, the name of that slide. So even if you end up reordering the slides, it will not impact this negatively. The nice thing with this custom button is I can now say here, review creating action buttons. Or depending on my use, I could just say review. And it's just a graphical element with text, so I can make it a little bit larger if I choose. I can change the font color if I choose. I can also do shape format, and of course I can change the fill and the outline and so on and so forth if I chose to. Now I could make this very small if I wanted to. I'm going to put this down in the corner. When I get to this point, let's say in this presentation with students, if they need a review, the teacher can then simply click on this button and it will take them back. In this case, I'm only going back 2 slides. Now, another thing that I could do is, to make this more robust in design, I could insert a special button that excites me as a computer programmer type person. And it's the button that has this little return symbol on it. So I'm going to put a little return over here, and this implies and suggests the last slide that was viewed. In other words, wherever you just came from, it's going to take you back. So this button changes where it sends you depending on where you last were. So let me run this application. So now we come upon the slide with our students and we say, okay, I see you need some review. All right, let me just click out here. Now we go back to the review, and then I'm going to click that button after we review this and immediately jump back into where we were prior to doing that review. So notice the implication here is that these action buttons have the ability to offer a lot of interesting things for us. So first of all, they can give us flexibility to jump to hyperlink to different places within the current PowerPoint file. We could also open up another PowerPoint file, one that we're not in currently. I can do that by selecting one of these buttons, and then where it says to hyperlink, now I'm going to select other PowerPoint presentation. And now it opens up a bunch of PowerPoints that I already have in the last directory where I was located. So I'm going to go back to our first class. I'm going to put this in, and then here's a nice feature. It also says, well, where exactly do you want to go in here? So I'm going to jump to the place where we were talking about elements of an effective interface. And I could say that here, elements of an interface. And I could play with the text and so on and so forth. Now, watch how smooth this is. I'll press this button in my first PowerPoint. Now this is just Windows saying, PowerPoint saying, is this okay? It's for security purposes. And there I am.
Brown, with his first work in 1988,
and there's me talking on the first PowerPoint. I'm going to hit the escape key, and now I go right back into where we left off. So again, very smooth transitions. This enables a user to move from one place to another very quickly. Now, we started within the PowerPoint, we navigated to another PowerPoint. Now, let's navigate to a particular URL. So I'm going to go back to Insert Shapes. I'm going to draw out one of these action buttons. And now I can navigate. Notice when I'm navigating, all the things I've been doing are under hyperlink. I didn't run a program because that's just opening up some application without a data file. You could run a macro. You could do other things here and play sounds. So really everything we're doing, for the most part, is under hyperlink. I'm going to select a URL. It's already putting the HTTP in. I already went out to a website, and I'm going to paste this misericordia.edu URL. And at this point, because this is that blank custom button, I can say to go to the Misericordia website. I can play with the text. I can play with the color of the button if I choose. Make that readable. And just to show I can do it, I could go shape format, and I could change the fill, and I could make this a whole different color. I'm going to go more with the Misericordia's Azure Blue. Well, I'm not sure I've chosen Azure there. And then I'm going to choose an outline to choose the Misericordia Gold. And there we are. And if I were to run this presentation, all I'd have to do is click this button. Notice the little balloon popping up saying that it's going to travel there. So it's going to navigate us there. So this will take us out of the, away from this particular presentation. So these action buttons in PowerPoint allow a lot of flexibility and interactivity for the user and also the teacher, depending how the presentation is being used. Now let's look at one additional skill that will enable us to create menus in PowerPoint. And that skill involves creating invisible action buttons. Now, what's great with these invisible buttons is that you can create interactivity in your classroom using PowerPoint. If you're using with a smartboard, you can create hotspots where students can interact with the slideshow. If you're creating a standalone application using PowerPoint as the platform, students can click on these buttons in order to interact with the app. So here I have a button, and what makes it visible? Well, I've got an outline and I've got a fill color. So let me go to shape format after I've clicked on the button, and notice I click on the outside of the button and not inside. Because here I would be working with the text box that's associated with this button and not the button itself. Let me click on one of the sides. I've got it. Let me go to shape format and shape outline. Let me say no outline. Now notice the outline has disappeared. If I highlight this one more time and go to shape format and say shape fill and say no fill, if it weren't for the sake of this text in here, which I can take care of in a hurry, just delete it, I now cannot see this button. So sure enough, that is an invisible button. The good news is the invisible button will still work. So let's create some hotspots on a screen over graphics using invisible buttons. And by doing so, we can create a menu. So first of all, the layout. Here I've got one big graphic. I'd like to create hotspots on it, like North America, South America, Africa, Asia, and so on. And I have subsequent slides here that I would put more information on. Like here, this could be a North America slide, and South America, and so on. Now, I could certainly use this in live teaching. I could also use this to form part of an application where I could have students working independently or in small groups on a computer or on an iPad or other tablet device. So let me start by creating some action buttons here. I'm going to say insert, and in this case, when I go to insert shapes, I'm definitely going to insert the blank, this custom button. The reason why I want to do that, once I try to make this invisible, if I have an icon on there, it will not be invisible, not fully. So at this point, I'm going to go to the next slide, Let me make this invisible. Shape fill, well, I have it highlighted. I'm going to say no fill, and I'm going to say outline, no outline as I did before. Sure enough, that's invisible. If I click on this button, it will navigate me to here. And I could do the same thing on with these other continents as well. Let me just do one more. Insert shapes. I will go down to the custom. I'm going to do Africa this time. Notice I'm being a little lenient here in terms of not being too specific in case a user clicks a little bit outside of the lines. I'm going to hyperlink to a slide. Well, now it's not the next slide anymore, so I'm going to have to go to a particular slide. Here's my Africa slide. Got it. Locked in. Now, this time I don't have to go in and specify the colors. I can grab the swatch that's right here. No fill, no outline. And once again, when I click on this, I now have two active buttons that are going to take me to the appropriate places here in this application. Now, to make this a little more robust, we already saw that we can use a return button. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. So here's a return button, and I'm going to put the return down here, and I'm going to say the last slide that was viewed. Now, in this case, in case I wanted to, I know exactly where I'm going back to that menu slide. I don't have to use last slide viewed. I could specify I want to go to that slide in particular. I'll move this up a little bit. And once I have this, because it says whatever the last slide viewed is, I can copy it, I can paste it here, and I can paste it here. Now, when I run this application, notice that I have the hot pointer over these continents. If I click on this one, here I am, press this button, I go back. Now I'm going to skip a slide and go up to the African slide, press this button, and I go back. So notice this graphic with these hotspots included really is functioning as a menu. Let's do another example. Let's say I was doing something regarding PC keys, and I'm teaching younger students about the control key, and here it is in context with other keys. Now, if I'm working with this bigger graphic, I really want to highlight a hotspot over here. So let me go do that. Let me say insert shapes. I'm going to grab the custom or the blank button. I'll give a little extra leeway here so the student can be a little bit off in the clicking. In this case, I know I'm going to the next slide, so I'll just do that. And I'm going to take out the fill and the outline. And sure enough, when I would run this application, I can click on this button, and this action button over this graphic will lead me to the next slide, and I have a return button here ready to go. Now let me just show one variation. Here I have a graphic that already is showing the whole piece that I want. I don't need to make part of this graphic hot as I did over here. I have to take every individual letter key and I'd have to highlight them and make them hot. Here I've already got something that's hot. If I wanted to, I could go up to Insert and I could go to Action. Well, look at that. There's the action settings. And once again, I could say, take me to the next slide, but I could, but I don't have to make a hotspot over this. I could say, just make this graphic hot. So either this graphic or this hotspot on this larger graphic will take me to here. And once again, we have a menu. Now, one quick word about PowerPoint. In the last several versions, they've changed the nomenclature, and they may change it back again. When I'm over a graphic and I was looking for action, sometimes you will find here they have the word link, so or hyperlink, depending what version you're looking at. So sometimes one of these tools, action or hyperlink, would take you to this dialog, which looks like a web page and you're actually hyperlinking somewhere. Sometimes both tools take you to the same dialog action setting. So just be aware that if it doesn't look exactly the same of this, click on the other tool. Just a little version changes in versions, little version glitches. Finally, let's look at one other example. Let's say I wanted to set up something to be remedial or as an application within my class after we're talking about microscopes. And maybe I'd like to just do a review about microscopes. So let me create some hotspots here. So here's one big graphic. So I can't go up and say action settings for this because I don't want to just click anywhere. I'm going to click over specific places. For example, I could say, let's click on the objective. So here's the objective up here. So let's click on that particular lens. So let me go and make a hotspot here. I'm going to say insert shapes. I'm going to go down and get the blank button, and I'm going to be a little liberal here as I draw this out without overlapping where the other buttons will go. And in this case, I only have one other slide, so I'll just say next slide. Otherwise, I would have said this is the exact slide that I want to go to right down here. But right now, I only have one, so it's just going to the next slide. Now, I'm going to take out the fill. I'm going to take out the outline. When I run this, and the user clicks on this part, it will take them to this slide where it talks about the objective lens, and they can read about the objective. I put very specific information, as I did here, about the objective. Then I could also go and create hotspots like up here and down here for this control, and down here where the slide goes, and so on and so forth. So in essence, I've created a menu and a graphical menu that students could use. So again, could I use this for live teaching? Oh, yes, I could certainly do something nice with that. I could say, okay, well, let's, class, tell me where the objective is, or someone come up and click on this for me. So I could do that, but I could also make a standalone application where this now functions as an interactive activity with the students, and it could even be a menu to lead into other learning. Having considered the skills involved in PowerPoint to create a menu using action buttons and other tools that we just looked at, now let's turn our focus to design of a menu and sound navigation. So what is, technically speaking, a menu? A menu is an organizing device that allows a learner of an application to select where to go within that application. It should promote learner control. It should enable the learner to quickly and easily understand how the application is organized. That being said, it should be intuitive and logical, and it should take ideally very little or virtually no time at all or effort to interpret, to understand, to figure out, and then be able to use it. In a previous class, we talked about metaphor. If you're creating an application, once you've selected a metaphor that's appropriate for your audience, your group of students, your learners, and that subject matter, you can then design a menu that's based on that metaphor. Here are a few tips and design strategies when you're creating navigation. When planning navigation, make sure you include strategies that users will know at all times where they're located within the application. There's nothing more disconcerting to a learner than to have no idea where he or she is within that application. Write appropriate instructions and prompts to make sure that the users know how to navigate through that application. Be sure to maintain consistency throughout. And as we looked at Brown and some of the other researchers who have suggested guidelines for consistency, consider those, and also consider how are you specifically requiring students to do certain things. Where exactly is the go forward button going to be located? Where and how exactly will the button to go back look, or to exit, or to go back to the menu. Again, maintain consistency by remembering what standards are, and also the standards that you're creating for your particular application. When you're planning navigation, make sure to consider these items. Will all of the user's navigation come from a main menu? Are you going to navigate users to submenus? If you do, can they easily find their way back to the main menu? Will they get lost? Are the same buttons, the same icons, the same prompts? Is everything being used consistently throughout the entire application? And also, are you going to provide items like hyperlinking to some place to get more information, or to get some help, or to review some content? Can your users return to a previous screen, or could they repeat a section of your application? If there's no good reason to not do this, then you should provide those possibilities. And the reason is because you want to make sure the learners have control over their learning. Remember to think about, does the user always know where he or she is within an application? And also, if a user is confused, is help available for them, and do they realize it? Here are a series of action buttons. They're being used together to create a menu, and it's a positive example of a menu. The words here, the instructions are clear. You see the prompt on top. Please select from the following menu choices. It's easy to see to get help. It's all text-based, but it's short, it's concise, it's clear, so it is a positive example. Here's a positive example that was created in PowerPoint simply using text boxes and appropriate graphics. Again, short, concise, easy to understand, and we would assume that the user would be taken back here to this main menu, because this is where the main exit is located as well, and the help area too. Again, a positive example. Here is one final positive example of a menu used for navigation within an app, and using the metaphor of baseball. Notice we can see very clearly how to get started, where the 3 lessons are located, how to get help, how to exit, and also in the upper left there's a scoreboard which could be used to help users chart their progress through the application. As we proceed through this week's class, let's consider navigation, design, and navigation issues as we examine the following practical applications. Let's look at creating a virtual museum, let's look at creating a PowerCast, and let's design a Prezi. See you in the next video.